adoptive parents. They seem to be in such a major. Welcome to the BMore podcast. I'm Erica Kane, and today's guest is a leader, a community advocate, a family man, and for more than 25 years he served as both a prosecutor and a defense attorney, and he is Baltimore City State's Attorney. Welcome, S.A. Ivan Bates.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for saying those nice things about me. I'm really, really glad to be here.
I'm glad you are here. I'm very glad you're here as well. So you are celebrating the first 100 days in office.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you.
In just a few minutes, we're going to get into, I guess, the anticipations versus the realities,
Yes,
right?
okay.
Because we know everything takes time.
Yes.
But so far, the approval ratings have been good. So
Yes. We've been blessed, very blessed. Thank you.
So we'll get into it. But one of the reasons why we wanted to invite you here, because you have such an interesting story, and we just wanted to get to know more about you.
Okay.
As the person is about the man, know about more about your background.
Okay.
So can we take it all the way back to Texas?
Oh, wow. From when I was born? Wow.
Well, I say that because, when you talk about your adoptive parents, they
Yeah.
seem to be in such a major influence
Oh, yeah, without
on
a
your
doubt.
life, of course, when you tell stories about your mom and about your
Yeah.
parents. So, and I heard a story that growing up, your mom said that she would personally call the cops on you
with
herself
weed.
if she
Oh,
caught you
yeah.
with marijuana.
Yeah, my mom did not play.
Yeah.
Rest her soul. So yeah, interesting story. I'm adopted, born in El Paso, Texas. I'm not going to say the year, but it was a while ago. And my father was in the military, and being adopted by my parents was truly the greatest thing that could have happened to me, because my parents were married 58 years before my mother passed. And my father gave me a lot. He was really, without a doubt, my hero. To this
Yeah.
day, he's still my hero.
Yeah.
And good man, worked hard. I learned a lot going to schools in Germany, Virginia, New Mexico. My father was there throwing pitches to me, playing baseball. He was just a really good man that was a really good father to me. So I had a phenomenal role model. My mother was a strict disciplinarian. She didn't play. I was blessed she didn't work. But she's put a lot of time and energy. A little hard-headed, finally going to, my father was first New Mexico, then Germany, then Virginia, and I finally graduated from high school. I wasn't a very focused student. I was smart, but I really wasn't focused. Barely graduated from high school. Matter of fact, a teacher gave me a D so I could graduate, and I went to the Army. I remember being in that time period. And I'll never forget when it was time to graduate. I was down in Hampton, Virginia, and we were in Coliseum Mall. I mean, the Coliseum, Hampton Coliseum, and it was huge. And they were saying where everybody was going to college. A lot of my college classmates went to Norfolk State.
Right.
And a few went to Hampton. I don't know. Maybe one went to Howard, another went to Morgan, Coppin. Number of HBCUs. Grew up with HBCUs. They said Ivan Bates, United States Army. And I remember all my classmates just laughing and giggling. I felt so bad. And I made a promise to myself, one of these days I'm going to go to college. So I went to the Army. I hated the Army. I hated taking orders. I hated digging ditches. I hated they would wake you up 3 o'clock in the morning and tell you to do guard. And I was like, nobody on earth knows I'm here and I'm guarding a fire hydrant that no one cares about. And so, but I quickly learned. I had a sergeant major. He was who had been in Vietnam, and had been in the military for a long time. And he said, why are you here? And I said, well, I'm here today. He said, no, you're really smart. He said, you get it, and you're a leader. And he said, look at our lieutenant. That man's going to get us killed. He doesn't know what he's doing, doesn't know how to do this, doesn't know how to do that. And by that time, there was a thing called French Commando School. I tried out. I think a couple hundred people tried out. I was selected. I was a map reader. I was really young. I went in at 17 at the Army. I came out at 19. I got money to go to college, and I'll never forget, I called one of my best friends who was at Howard University, and I'll never forget, what are you doing? And I heard all these women in the background.
Women, I was going to say great
That's
things, but you heard the girls.
Well, I heard they're in the quad, back in the quad.
Yes,
I heard
I
all
lived
these
in the
women.
quad.
Yes, so you know.
Right.
And I heard all these women. I said, who are they?
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, we're all here. And she explained the quad. And I was like, oh, well, I need to go there. Remember, I was in Germany in the woods all the time.
Right.
So I was very happy to get back to civilization.
Right.
So from there, I went to Howard University. I was really excited to go to Howard, but I realized because I had not done the work early on, I didn't have the skills and tools needed to be successful. So I had a young lady I was dating, and I never forget, we were in the library, and I was only in the library because I was trying to talk to her. And I asked her, what's she doing? She said she was studying. And I asked her, well, could you teach me how to do it the right way? And she taught me. And from there, I was blessed, ended up graduating from Howard, cum laude, student body president. At Howard University, and that's where I really, really began to figure out who I was going to be in life. And, I'll never forget, I said, hey, you need to go to law school. And I was like, well, why? And they're like, well, you'd be a really good lawyer. Everybody would always talk about my leadership ability. And from there, I went to WMAR Law School. It was great. It was very interesting, but no one hardly looked like me. I think out of 1,800 people, 17 or 18 were black.
Okay.
And 8 didn't even really truly identify as being black. And,
Okay.
I learned a lot about myself. It was a humbling experience. I said, you're going to give me a degree and a diploma, and I'm going to set the world on fire in my own mind. I clerked for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund out in L.A. I was there during O.J. Simpson's situation. I went to school with his daughter at Howard, Arnell. I was at the house, met a lot of the people who were there. Cato Kalin was there when the Broncos situation happened.
Wow,
Yeah,
really?
oh yeah, it was crazy.
Wow.
And so it was very interesting. I'll never forget almost being in the crosswalk and Johnny Cochran riding in his, I think it was a white Royals, almost hitting me as he was trying to hurry up and get to court that day.
Wow.
And, just being around it. I worked with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. We helped negotiate and work on the Gang Peace Treaty in L.A. during the time period, the Bloods and Crips. And so I saw a lot. And then I also dealt with an issue involving the police, L.A. County Sheriff's Department, releasing dogs, the canines, disproportionately on blacks and Latinos. And when we filed our lawsuit, it was like 99 out of 100 times the dogs were released, they bid an individual as black or Latino 99% of the time. We filed our lawsuit and it dropped from 99 to like 5 or 6% of the time. And so they settled, and the last thing I did is I brought a check to Allenwood Federal Prison to a young man from L.A. who was doing federal time, and I gave him, I think it was $150,000, $160,000 check.
Okay.
And so that kind of really got me in wanting to do the criminal law.
Okay.
Graduated from William and Mary Law School. But also William and Mary was important because one of the things I still remembered was that I was always going to be black, and no matter what that degree said. So I clerked also for the Gloucester County State's Attorney's Office, and they called it Commonwealth Attorney, Gloucester County Commonwealth Attorney. And I'll never forget, I was in my 3rd year, and I had to write. We didn't have the internet back then. And it tells you now how old I am. Internet was right on the cusp, but it wasn't there.
Right.
And so I go out there, and the man who's the Commonwealth Attorney, the DA, what I am now, I give him he says, you're Ivan Bates? I said, yes, sir. And he has this deep country accent. Oh, well, they didn't tell me he was colored.
Oh.
I was like, oh.
Oh.
And he says, well, when they start letting colors in the law school, William and Mary. And I was like, oh, I think that was 74 was the first graduate. And he had graduated from William and Mary Law School in the 50s.
Wow.
And so he said, look, you don't need to ever come again. You can just mail me your things that you're writing, your research. And I was like more than happy because for me, I needed the check because it was a stipend, helped pay my tuition. So that was very important because on one hand, I had the NAACP where I was fighting for black people. On the other hand, I had a man who I viewed as very racist, who was the DA, who administers justice to people that looked like me, who didn't want me out there because I looked like the people he was prosecuting. And so that was, to me, some of the things that have trained me and shaped me in my early days.
Well, and besides your experience there at William and Mary, I wanted to know, even about your other experiences, because you moved around so much. You had that Army rat experience. And then I saw a note where you went to Bethel High School
Yes.
in Virginia. That's Allen Iverson's
Bubba Chuck.
high school,
Yeah,
right?
he was behind me.
So now, of course, segregation was officially over, like the 50s, right? Technically, but now 70s and 60s, there was still segregation happening. So when you were in attendance at Bethel High School at that time, it was still segregated in a sense?
Well, I was high school in the 80s, and the crazy thing was we were bused. So I lived in a black part of town. I lived in a black neighborhood, and there was one main road in Hampton, Virginia called Mercury Boulevard. And I was bused from the black part of town to the white part of town.
Right.
And, I'll never forget I had one of my best friends. He lived in the white part of town. And the things that we used to hear, and I'll never forget being chased through the woods because we were on the white part of town when it was dark. I'll never forget that I was in high school, a senior, and there's this white girl, and she liked me. I liked her. She called me. I called her, and her father picking up the phone and said, you know what, the N-word, if you ever call my house again, we're going to string you up.
Wow.
I was like, oh. And, next day she talked to me. I even look at her. I was like, I had nothing to say.
Yeah.
And so it's quickly embedded in me that what you do and what you don't do, this is the side of town you need to stay on. So, you have all those experiences. But I also say, look, I grew up with people riding their pickup trucks with their Confederate flag and their shotgun sitting in the school parking lot.
Right.
So, I mean, race and racism was just kind of really how I grew up. But, I think that it affected me, but I didn't let it define me.
Right.
And, I think the other good part was, I had Hampton University in there. And so I spent a lot of time at Hampton. I was a kiddie camp counselor. I knew when I was in high school, my girlfriend was Dr. Harvey's daughter, Kelly. So I was able to see a lot of things from that perspective.
Right.
So I understood what was going on. My father, when he finished the military, he graduated from Hampton Institute, which now is Hampton University.
Right.
So I guess I was really blessed in the sense that I saw what living in the white world, so to speak, was the racist world that I grew up in, but I also saw the education world with HBCUs. And for me, the HBCU could and would be my ticket to get out of where I was. I just really didn't apply myself. When I was in 8th grade, I took a test, and it said that I didn't have the aptitude to go to school. That I said I wanted to be a lawyer, so I didn't have the aptitude, and that I should think about being a brick mason.
Oh.
And so I was like, okay. And I think that test really played a role in my psyche, because at that point in time, I'm trying to figure out where I am. I didn't have the people who were pouring into me, no, you can do this, you can do that, you can do this. We were kind of raised that you go to high school and you work at the shipyard, and you make $15 an hour back then, and which is a lot of money back then. I think the minimum wage was like $5, $6 an hour.
Right.
You could make $15 an hour, you were rich.
Right.
And so that was kind of where I was. My father and mother, they believed in education. My mother was very, very intelligent. She had a high school diploma. I like to say when I was in the Army, I'd write letters, and my mom would send the letters back with red marks about all my spelling and grammar and punctuation mistakes.
Yes, Mom.
Exactly. I got to call them when I was in Germany only on Sunday at a specific time period because, we didn't have the internet.
Right.
And there was long distance. So I was truly by myself in Germany. But, I think going from Virginia and dealing with racism and then going to Germany where you're just one of so many few blacks.
Right. What was that like?
It was interesting. I did like a lot of Germans. I dated like a lot of American servicemen. I dated Germans. Hung out with Italians, Africans, and I met a lot of people from a number of different cultures. I understood the European culture, the openness, the freedom, the acceptance of everybody.
Right.
They were very acceptant of the LGBTQ community way before anybody in America was.
Right.
Growing up South, it's the worst thing on earth. But seeing it in Europe, you're like, wow, it opened up your mind. I think being a military serviceman over there was very, very good because it allowed me to see who people were and accept people for who they are and not try to be so judgmental. And being in the Army was a great experience. I mean, it humbled me. I had to dig ditches. like I said, I tried out for French Commando School. That really instilled something in me, understanding leadership, perseverance, making sure that no matter how difficult it was, I could put everything on my back and get it through. I was 18 years of age. I was the map reader. They would literally drop us and I would read the map, but it wasn't like a map like we would see now. It was a map that had, where were the fields and what the mountains look like and the drifts and all that. One time in French Commando School, I was the only one who could swim. And they tied a rope across my midsection. I swam through the smallest part of the Rhine River to get through because we were prisoners of war that night. And I swam across with the rope, and then I tied it to the tree to get the rest of my team across. And so things like that build character. It tries to show you can do things.
Right.
And, it also, I think, really instilled to me with the leadership that when you're a leader, you have to sometimes make the hard decisions and you have to show people what you need to do.
Right. Do you think that frame of thinking encouraged your choice to go into the Army versus college, that frame of thinking of not really having the teachers or the guidance counselors say, hey, no, you can do this?
Well, it was two things. The teachers and guidance counselors, they really weren't pushing me for college, but my mom wore me out. My parents, when I graduated from high school, I was 17. My dad said, oh, congratulations. I thought I was going to chill for the summer. My dad was like, oh, yeah, you need to get up out of my house.
Oh.
It's time for your mom and I to enjoy our life.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, okay. You don't understand. My mom at midnight, my mom was like, oh, where are you? The street lights come on. My dad was looking for me in the neighborhood. I was the only one that had a basketball.
Right.
So you know what it was like when the street lights came on and we shooting ball?
Yeah.
And I'm not like, either my dad would have a little bike, he would ring his bike to let me know he was coming.
Right.
And either I had to grab my ball before he saw me, because if he saw me, he's going to beat my butt all the way home.
Right.
So I would grab my ball and outrun everybody I was playing basketball with and my dad to get home before anybody else. So I couldn't live like that forever. My mom had rules. So either I was going to live on my own,
Right.
or I was going to live under her rules.
Okay.
And, you're 17, you're starting to feel yourself,
Right.
girls coming around. You're like, oh, no, I can't live like this.
Okay.
I stayed out one night till 2 o'clock in the morning. And everything was locked.
Oh,
So I had to sit outside in the car.
Okay.
And my dad used the car to go to work the next morning. So my mom was not happy with that. So I was on punishment for like a week or two after that one.
Right.
So, my mother and father strongly suggested that I find my own way in life since I
Right.
didn't want to do what I needed to do with school. So, so some of this tough love that I talk about, I experienced it.
Okay. And so the Army it was. I mean, my experience in high school, the Army recruiter came to my home because I showed interest, and my mom might as well have come out with a shotgun, and he just kind of scattered off and didn't come back. But maybe your Army recruiter experience was different than mine.
My Army recruiter looked exactly like Whitney Houston.
Oh, that's
at
why you went in the
height
Army.
of Whitney Houston.
Oh,
and
that's
she
why.
told me you got to camp, you get to see the world, and you get money. So I was like, oh, this is the place for me.
Oh, she
and I
got
asked
you.
her one question. I said, all the women look like me? That was not true. I never saw anybody. I think I saw one or two other females the rest of the time I was in the Army. Now, the females were in the Air Force, but they weren't in the Army when I was there.
Right.
So
Sergeant Whitney lied to you.
yeah, she sure did. And remember, that's when Whitney was on fire, Whitney.
Right. So that's why. Okay, now we know.
So you put all that together. So if you understand, when I was 17,
Yeah.
you see I was a 17-year-old boy. I was like,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the women fine?
Yeah.
Well, look, consequently, I went to Howard University.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
I was always chasing.
Yes. And at Howard, you found your stride. You became the second president of the Howard Student Association.
I was.
So even before you reached William and Mary, you were finding your stride there.
I did. But remember, the whole reason I found my stride was because I was trying to talk to the young lady who was in the library.
Okay.
And
I
then,
see the motivation.
I never forget. You're right. When I was in Howard University, they sit you down in the auditorium and they sit down, they talk about to the person, look to the left, look to the right, not everyone's going to be here. I'll never forget, I was walking up the hill and they had the valley, and I saw this African brother, and he had one of the most beautiful women I'd ever seen holding his hand. I see him a little later in the calf, and I asked him, how did you get her? And then he basically said, my brother, you just need to graduate. He said, because they didn't want to talk to me when I was a freshman,
Huh?
but I'm about to graduate and I have a nice engineering job.
Okay, okay.
And so my motivation was, oh, wow, I just need to graduate. So along the way, I channeled that from, hey, you know what, I need to grow and I need to mature and I need to be focused on the books.
Okay.
And that's, what got me in the door, I'm not going to lie, what got me in the door was, I enjoyed being around the beautiful women that Howard University had, the numerous.
Now, as an alum, I can say that, Howard University, I think we're doing better than the Army.
Yeah, oh my goodness. It was like going from the desert to an all-you-can-eat buffet. That's what I'm talking about.
But now, after graduating from Howard, was there a time where you were entertaining doing something else? Were you entertaining a move to LA possibly? And were you going to continue down the same path, or were you looking to do something completely different?
After law school, I clerked for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. I was going to move back to LA. But once again, my mom was a dynamic force in my life. And my mom asked me to move to Baltimore. I had an aunt. She lived 11 West 20th Street, apartment 6S, Edna Dennison, her sister. And Edna was like 65, 75, I think, 75, 72. And she didn't have any children. And my mom asked me to move to Baltimore to help take care of her. So I applied to be a law clerk with Judge David Mitchell, and I was successful. He hired me. And and that's when I moved to Baltimore, and my life changed greatly.
See, Mom knows at the end of the day.
She really did.
Yeah, now imagine you're giving up moving to LA to take care of Aunt Edna, which I know you love.
I loved Aunt Edna, but it wasn't
know?
LA. Yeah, you're right, it wasn't LA.
That's hard.
Well, when my mama talked, I listened.
Okay.
Remember, this is the same woman that forced me in her own way to leave the house.
Yes, yes.
And, also, it's funny because my Aunt Edna was the only other woman in my life, beside my mother, that, let's just say, fired me up.
Okay.
My grandfather lived in Saluda, Virginia. He had a well. And I'll never forget being a young child and throwing grass in the well. Well, they got their drinking water out the well. And my Aunt Edna saw me do that. And she took a switch off the tree and wrapped it around my legs and tarred my legs up that I realized I couldn't do that.
Right.
So then my mother asked me to take care of my aunt that spanked me with that switch.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a difficult decision, but one, let's just say, that I'm glad I made.
Absolutely, and we are also. So now you land in Baltimore, and it gets real, because, of course, you don't get to Baltimore and just, you're going to work if you come to Baltimore. It's a lot going on. So then you get into the homicide division,
yes,
right?
the State's Attorney's Office.
State's Attorney's Office. How was, well, that opened you up to Baltimore, I'm sure.
It did, but even before I got to the homicide, there was a gas station on Route 40. And to this day, I think of that gas station. When I was in felony, I had 3 or 4 robberies of that gas station. I learned the city through my cases, especially Southwest District. When I was in the State's Attorney's Office early on, I was a prosecutor in Southwest District. And I realized for me to prosecute, I need to understand the city. And one of the things that people didn't know, I was a middle school basketball coach for Rognell Heights Middle School, but it's no longer there. And I felt before I could really prosecute in the city, I need to understand the city. And Rognell Heights and Southwest District really have a soft spot for me, because that's when I really got to understand the city. Is where I got to understand what's going on with these kids. And homicide really hurt me because that's where I see them dying.
Right.
And, first when I got to homicide, I would see the medical examiner's pictures, and I would be sick all day. But after you're looking at them for about 7, 8 months, you're eating lunch, eating your peanut butter and jelly sandwich, look at me desensitized. You're right. But I never desensitized to the murders that you see. One of the major cases I worked on is a gentleman, his name was Linnell Whiting, and we believed he was a serial killer of homosexual men. And we went to trial. He was found guilty. And he's still doing a life sentence. And, that was an eye-opener, because I understood the culture. I understood how to put a case together. The attorney I did it with was named Stephanie Royster. She passed. She was a mentor of mine. And, as you're doing those cases, you truly understand what it means to the victims and the families. To this day, a young lady, I think her name is Kim, she was the correctional officer that was friends with the victim. And it was like his sister. And her and I still stay in contact to this day. And what you learn when you represent a family in a homicide, you're part of their family because you're helping them get justice and heal. And that was something I really enjoyed. But I had student loans. I was moving on with my life, and I left the state's attorney's office in 2002 after 6 years.
Right.
June 21st, 2002 was when I left the state's attorney's office.
Still remember the date.
I remember the date. I remember everything about that.
Wow. And what was that transition? Because is that when you transitioned into becoming a DA for one of the top firms?
No, well, it's when I became a defense attorney, and the firm's name was Shulman Treen. It was in World Trade Center.
Right.
It was really good. I learned an awful lot. The paychecks were a lot different, but the work and the grind was a lot different.
Yeah.
I'll never forget my first trial was Anne Arundel County, and it was indecent exposure where my client got mad and he mooned a young lady in the store in Anne Arundel Mills.
Oh, why?
And they found my client guilty. I was so angry, I wrote the judge a motion of why he shouldn't have been found guilty, and the judge responded and threw out the conviction. It was like, Mr. Bates is right. And at that moment in time, we were like, wow, you got the it factor. And I'd have to say from there, I did a lot of cases. I won some, I lost some. I did cases all around the state, did cases in different parts of the country, all types of murder cases, federal cases, state cases. And I really had the opportunity to build a really good practice. I learned a lot of things. I made some terrible mistakes. But I also learned from my mistakes. I started, then eventually after 4 years at Shulman Treen, I started my own law firm in 2006, January 2006. Shulman Treen, I had a case that went before the United States Supreme Court.
Is that Maryland versus Blake? Or?
Yes, yes.
That was an interesting.
It was very interesting. Young kid from Anne Arundel County, living in some of the projects, low-income housing there. He's with a young man who's older, and they ride over and shoot and kill a individual. He steal his Jeep, something that shocked the consciousness of Anne Arundel County. And they snatch Leander, who was 15, I think, at the time. They snatch him up, take him to police headquarters, and only his underwear and his tank top. And he's so afraid. The only thing he says, I want a lawyer. But they need a statement. And they continue. And finally, they let him know he's going to get the death penalty, and was called the reinitiation of interrogation.
Which was not true at the time, right? Because he was too young?
He was too young.
For a death penalty, but that's what they told him.
Yes, and that was a lie. And you have the reinitiation of interrogation. He'd already asked for an attorney, and they didn't do something to try to get him an attorney. And we go before a judge who grants it for us, our motion, and throws it out. They then, I'm photographed walking him out the jail. And that was the first really high-profile case that I had. And it was my boss at the time who did the case, and we did it together. And then from there, the case goes before the Court of Special Appeals, and back then it was the Court of Appeals, which now is the Supreme Court. And we lose the Court of Special Appeals, but we win in the Supreme Court. The Court of Appeals we win, which is now the Supreme Court. And then they appeal it to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they take it. And so it was amazing because we're in there in the United States Supreme Court. I remember it was an October day. And I remember because Justice Sandra Day O'Connor was the last case that she ever listened to. One of the reasons I wanted to be a lawyer was because of Thurgood Marshall. He was definitely my hero. And when I looked at Sandra Day O'Connor, for many people, she was a shero, and for me, she was a shero.
Absolutely.
She broke that glass ceiling for women. And I just kind of stared at her, looking at her. And then I remember we were winning the argument, and the new Chief Justice Roberts says, well, I don't really think this is the case for us, and maybe this would be better under the federal carjacking statute. Rather than give us the victory, he decides not to rule on it per se, sends it, and the federal court picks it up, and Leander is later found guilty, and he's given a life sentence. However, they've now changed that because he was a juvenile. So I believe he should be coming home soon. An eye-opening experience of how the criminal justice system works.
Absolutely. So coming from that, what prompted the partnership of Bates and Garcia? What prompted you to, what prompted the partnership, and what prompted you to start your own firm?
Um, well, I had a couple other partners, a young lady named Miriam Sadiq and Sharon A.H. May. Sharon May was a prosecutor who was my old boss, and Miriam and I worked together at Shulman Treem.
Okay.
And that was a good experience. However, everybody kind of wanted to do their own thing. Tom Donnelly, who's now my deputy, works with me. He did a lot of support with us in the work. And so we were trying to build the firm. That's where I made so many mistakes. Oh my God, you name it. I did it wrong. Payroll mistakes, mistakes where I had not filed my motions in time. You name it, I made that mistake.
Okay.
And it was hard. And then Tony Garcia, who I worked with in the state's attorney's office, one of my best friends, he leaves. And eventually I just decided I want to be with Tony.
Okay.
And my other partners and I, we all go our separate ways. And Tony and I decided to be a partnership. But that was better because Tony knew me. We were a better fit. He was, Tony was the type of person when, excuse me, you go in front of a jury, Tony's going to tell a phenomenal story. I was more, as they would say, I was a little suave with him. I'm going in front of the jury. I'm going to try to be a little smooth with it.
Okay.
Tony's going to tell you a story to entertain you, and he's going to captivate you.
Okay.
And now we were very opposite ends of the spectrum, but I felt we were very good as a
together.
team.
Yeah.
And he didn't try to take my shine, and I didn't try to take his, and we both wanted to win together. And having Tony, and I tell people all the time, the most difficult part of having this job as state's attorney is very isolating. It's very lonely. And when you do something for so long with a person who's one of your best friends, and the banter and the talk, I miss my friend.
Right.
I miss talking to him about the cases.
Yeah.
I'm more emotional. I'm going, where Tony's going to be calm with the wisdom.
Right.
And so we balanced each other out, and we were able to build, I felt, a very nice practice. At one time, we had almost 13 people working for us. We did all types of cases, and I'll say we were very blessed financially.
So was it under Bates and Garcia that you took on the gun trace task force?
It was. I began to have more cases. I began to focus more on the federal side. He was the state side. And under Bates and Garcia, I realized a pattern what was going on, and I was able to focus. Tony allowed me to focus on those types of cases where he did some of the other cases.
Yeah.
And so that was really a good thing.
Yeah. And was it under Bates and Garcia also that you had Alicia D. White, who was from the Freddie Gray case? Now, I know that was a controversial client because, of course, she was one of the 6 police officers charged in the arrest and death of Freddie Gray in 2015. So what was that like for your firm taking that case on?
You know, when you go to Howard University, you kind of leave understanding your job is to make the life of black people better. And Alicia was the hardest case that I've ever taken on.
I can imagine.
So the state's attorney at the time announced the charges. My phone rings while she's announcing, and I hear a woman crying. And then she tells me who she is. I have her come to the office. I ask her what happened. And I asked her 3 times. Every time she told the same story. I was like, wow. And I sit and I tell Tony, and we had an associate named Mary Lloyd. I said, we take this, it's going to change the trajectory of our office.
Absolutely.
And he went to Hampton, I went to Howard. I said, you know what they're going to say about us. And we talked, I thought about it, and I prayed about it. And I remembered that I saw Alicia White as a black female. I saw her as a black woman. And I still felt I was fighting against a system that had implicit bias. And so for me, I didn't see the blue in the police officer. I saw a system that was going after her because she was a black woman who just happened to be a police officer. Where the rest of the world saw her as a police officer, that was the system.
Yeah.
So we took the case. It was hard. My friends from Howard called me Uncle Tom, sellout, you name it. I got called a lot of names.
Wow.
I felt very isolated, very lonely. And all that did was make me hunker down and fight harder. I learned an awful lot about charging police, prosecuting police, and
it puts you in a very precarious position.
It did.
Possibly, yeah.
It did. But I also am a real big believer of the system getting it right. It doesn't matter who you are. I mean, look, I may not like you. You could be a member of the KKK. And if we violate your constitutional rights, Constitution trumps. You could be a guy who's on the streets that shot 12 people. We violate your constitutional rights. I got to follow the Constitution. So you have to stand for something.
Yeah.
And Alicia told me that I needed to stand for something. I stood for Alicia. To this day, I do not regret it at all.
Okay.
She's been promoted twice. The case against Sergeant White was an absolutely horrific case in the sense the state should have never brought it. I always felt that if the state would have sat down and talked to her, that she could have potentially been a witness with some of the issues that they wanted to pursue. But also what that taught me was that if you're going to pursue it against the police, you need to have the people who understand what's going on. And unfortunately, the state's attorney's office at that time period, there were just better lawyers on the other side. And they didn't have the lawyers who were experienced enough to handle that case. When you don't have lawyers who are experienced enough to handle those cases, you're going to have losses. And that was something, and one of the things I also really realized, the state's attorney's office need to have certain changes.
So that's 2015, and you said that was one of the most difficult cases that you ever had. And now, just come a couple of years later, you decide that you're going to run for Baltimore City's state's attorney.
Yes.
What prompted that decision?
Well, a couple. The Alicia White decision did. Part of it because I could see what was the mismanagement of the office. I could see the direction was going in. I felt things were being politically motivated. And having been an alum of the state's attorney's office, I looked at things differently.
Okay.
And I felt I could do a better job at that moment in time. I lost in 2018, and to be honest, it was the best thing to happen. I was married at the time. It was very difficult. My wife and I later on got a divorce, and I think some of it was the political side, to be honest. I had a new daughter at the time period, and I needed to be a father to her. So I'm a real big believer God does things. But the biggest thing I needed to do, I needed to mature. I needed to get my ego out the way and decide next time if I was going to run, it wasn't about me, it was about the people. And, the first run was about me and my ego. And I'll be honest about that.
Okay.
And I think God humbles you. And the second time I ran in 2022? It was about my daughter and about the people. I will tell you this. I was at the top of my career as a defense attorney, and I was transitioning to the civil side. Civil, I was very blessed, let's just say that.
Okay.
And I had a young daughter. She's 6 now. And one of the homicides I had involved a man in the park playground over in Cherry Hill. Another man ran through the playground just shooting and killed him. There were kids everywhere. Now, that's one of the murders that really stuck with me. And I would take my daughter to the playground here in the city, and I was always fidgety. I was looking over my shoulder because I wanted to make sure someone was going to run and shoot. We were now going from 200 murders all the way 300.
Right.
As a defense attorney, I had 4 to 6 clients every year I lost. I paid for a number of funerals, and I gave people money back because their loved ones were killed to pay for funerals.
Right.
And I just got to a point where I was tired of it, and I felt I had something to give. I was only going to run one more time. And running for public office takes a beating on your body, physically, emotionally, and the sacrifice was great. And this time was different because I wasn't married, so I wasn't worried about certain things. But I was very, very worried about my daughter. And my former mother-in-law came and she babysat my daughter, and my mom passed in 2021. So I had a lot of change. My mom was a little sick. My father and I home hospiced her for about 8 months before she passed.
Yeah.
And so I looked at life a lot differently this go around. And to be honest, I felt like I'm just put in God's hands and walk in faith.
Yeah.
And I was blessed.
Yeah. I'm glad you elaborated on that because, like you said, campaigns.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! I mean, they're costly. Like you said, it takes a toll on you physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. On top of that, you have so many people rallying behind you, campaigning for you, donating to your cause, and then to have all of that, and then election night comes, and you don't pull it off, and you don't. And there are very few people who can really kind of recover from that because it's devastating, So for you to be able to muster and say, okay, you know what, I'm finding a new sense of purpose, and now I know why I want to run again. Because a lot of folks can't always come back and run again.
Well, you're right. during that time period, I filmed a documentary, and there was a book written about the Gun Trace Task Force, and it allowed me to kind of purge.
Okay.
But I'm not gonna lie, having my daughter is really the best thing that's ever happened to me because it's given me a different sense of purpose. When you're successful on one side, I wanted to bring that to the other side.
Yes.
I didn't grow up feeling that success meant a certain dollar amount. I felt, as Howard, I learned you lift as you climb. And so for me, I felt like I was tired of representing the criminal element. I was tired of that.
Yeah.
But I felt like I was doing more harm than good. I was doing federal cases. I was doing more complex cases. My fees were bigger, but my heart wasn't in it. And I fell in love with Baltimore along the way living here, and it's almost as if you see someone that you love and they're going through something and you feel that you can help them. That I felt like I really needed to help them. I felt it was a time period in my life. I felt I was young enough. I felt I had the experience. I felt if I was going to do it, I could do it then. I had everything you to go along life. It had built me to this position. The military, in terms of leadership, in terms of pushing through the loss previously, recovering from the loss, understanding my focus, understanding my purpose, every single case. Having been a prosecutor, there's nothing my prosecutors probably have gone through that I haven't gone through, and understanding all of that. Also, I felt humbling myself to the loss to sit down. When you run and you run a race, it's like standing in front of the community with your clothes off.
Yes.
And they're going to say yay or they're going to say nay.
And put yourself out there.
And you do. And I just felt, for me, I've said I feel this is an 8-year job. And for me, I don't know what's going to happen next. But I can tell you that I'm focused on 3 things. One, being the best father I can and raising the best strong little girl possible. Number 2 is my job, because I made a campaign promise to the citizens, and I don't take promises lightly. And number 3, making sure that I have a quality life, when this is over. I tell people I got 16 years left.
Right.
And then I'm going to retire. I can't tell you what the 16 going to look like, but I can tell you what the first 8 of my mind will look like.
Okay.
If they want me back. After 4, they get to choose again.
Right.
And for me, it's assembling the best staff. I feel like as state's attorney, I have phenomenal, phenomenal people who know their job. And that part has been really probably the best part of being the state's attorney.
Right. So 2022 comes, you win the election, you run against Marilyn Mosby, you win. I don't know if you felt like you had it, or you just were you waiting, were you twiddling thumbs up until the end like everyone else?
When you're out there, I knocked 15,000 doors. And the first time I ran, people really didn't know me. They didn't want to care to know me. But you could see a change. You could see a shift. It went from, who are you? To, hey, Ivan Bates is at the door. And people would answer the door. People would talk to me on their Ring camera. Hey, Mr. Bates, we're not home. I really like you. We're voting for you. Good luck. I could feel the momentum. We knocked. We worked. But I'm one of these, let me keep my head down. I don't know what's going to happen. I went to all those older adult buildings. I went to the churches. I knocked on the doors. Every day it was a grind. And I felt it. And the night of the election, we got the early voting returns, and I won early voting. I was like, wow. And then we got the other returns. And I felt like we were going to win. But until they said yay, I was just as nervous as anybody else, because you never know what's going to happen.
Right, right. And now you're a bit more than 100 days in. You're a bit over 100 days in, the first 100 days. Got to see you throw the first pitch at the O's game with your daughter, London.
Yes, London.
Right?
Yes.
And so you said, your dad was really influential in you playing baseball. So I see you still had the arm, because
I did.
Listen, it must be harder than it looks, because the celebrities go out there and they fumble it all the time. It's like going to the left, going to the right, but that was you still got the arm.
Well, I'm going to tell you the secret behind that. I had my dad, and I also had, from my ex-wife, her daughter, who I helped raise, Brielle, who's still my daughter as well. Always will be in my life. So I had Brielle, I had London, I had my dad. But the night before, Tom Donnelly, who was one of my deputies, gave me his baseball mitt and his ball. So you may want to practice. I'm like, I got this. So I go out there and I start throwing the ball. I can't find literally nobody to play catch with. So I'm throwing the ball against the wall, and my arm was like, yo, dude, what are you doing?
Oh, yeah.
So the next day, I told my dad to be there at 11 o'clock so he could be at the game. I called my dad and said, Dad, could you do me a favor? He says, what? I said, could you come at 10 o'clock? I need you. At 10 o'clock in the morning, my dad was there, and we tossed the ball like we did when we were, like I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And once I did that, I had the confidence that I could do it.
You're good to
Now,
go.
they don't let you throw the pitch from the mound like they used to. You have to do right in front of the mound. I was very happy about that. And, I got the ball. At the end of the day, I did not want to be 50 Cent.
Right.
That was my goal, I
Right.
mean, he's a phenomenal businessman,
Yeah,
rapper.
he's a bad pitcher.
But he's not a good pitcher at all. And so that was my goal.
Okay. Well, 100 days in. So let's talk about anticipations versus realities, because of course there's a difference between what we plan to do, regardless of how good the intentions are, versus once we get there. And there are a lot of things that can play, a lot of factors that can play into that, along with, the situation that you came into and different things like that. So what was it like, kind of first day in the office, and it's like, oh gosh, was it big mess to clean up, or what's going on?
Yeah, it was first day. I had never been in the office before. And so I didn't get in the office till I was sworn in. And that was different, trying to figure out where the office was and everything. This is what I'll say, because I look at it like this. My first 30 days I spent talking about what the office wasn't, and I think we've moved on from there, and it's unfair. I think my predecessor did what she could do.
Absolutely.
And I feel like after 30 days, it became my issues. Those issues
Absolutely.
became mine. There were some things that needed to change. We focused on trying to change those. I had to change the culture. My first day, I'm so nervous, and not really about me. I'm nervous about London's dress.
Okay.
And her hair.
Dad.
Being a girl dad, you got to do girl hair.
Yes.
I'm terrified about her hair.
Right.
And I got a cute little dress. My birth mom, Valencia's there. My sister's there. My niece is there. I got her dress. I got to get her tights, make sure they don't have holes. I'm terrified about her hair. I'm not sleeping well. And I'm really only worried about London. And so I get up. I have a little bit of a cough. I get some cough medicine. My body's sore and achy. I take Advil. You don't take cough medicine with codeine and Advil, and you don't eat, because you got to eat. I didn't eat. And so I'm at an event, I'm speaking, all of a sudden my stomach starts to hurt, and I get sick as a dog.
Ooh.
I'm in the worst pain, stomach pain, and my executive protection stops. We stop at the courthouse because I'm supposed to swear the new prosecutors in, and I am bowled over. I was like, yo, I can't let the people see me. I'm sweating. I'm like really, really sick. And they call the ambulance. I'm like, don't call no ambulance. I finally say, okay, I'll sit in the ambulance. They give me an EKG. They give me everything. They're like, oh, we got to take you to the hospital.
Really?
So I get rushed to the hospital, and I have these nurses. And I'm like, oh, Mr. Bates, we sorry, but you're going to have to sit here. I was like, ain't no way. Y'all got to do what y'all got to do, but I'm not sitting here.
Right.
And, I was shocked to see in 45 minutes I could have a number of tests done and get out the emergency room. And basically they let me know I was dehydrated and that I also had mixed the medications that I shouldn't have.
Right.
And I missed giving the talk to the office, but I was there for my inauguration.
Gotcha.
But I had to eventually give that talk to the office. Eventually I did, and that was the most important talk, because the number of people were ready to leave. That office should have about 200 to 220 lawyers. We had about 134 that were sworn in.
Okay.
And we had almost every prosecutor had their resume out for another job.
Wow.
And I needed to do something to let people buy into my vision.
Absolutely.
And that, without a doubt, was its most important conversation. A few left, but not that many. We've hired 34 new prosecutors, 16 of which have come back. And so we're getting those numbers up. We've, instilled training yesterday at a training session, because this week is a judicial conference, so the judges aren't sitting on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And one of the young prosecutors said, "Hey, I've been here 6 years, Mr. Bates, and to be honest, I love my job now more than ever."
Okay.
That, the office is headed in the right direction. I love the fact that we're getting trained. And I love the fact that we're able to prosecute, and I feel like we're doing the right thing. And that was important, because those are the prosecutors I have to sell on my vision, because they're the ones doing the work.
Absolutely.
And so there were some cultural issues. We're still quite a few. We're a long, long, long way from changing it.
Yeah.
But I feel we're moving in that right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, here in Baltimore, here in Maryland, here in the country, period, gun control is a major issue.
Yeah.
The right to bear arms is one thing, but shooting defenseless people in supermarkets, or shooting someone because they pulled into your driveway, or, shooting your girlfriend because you're upset, or, that's not self-defense. That's just people just haphazardly killing people, and having access to these automatic weapons that do such damage to the bodies, and how the medical examiners explain how it just pulverizes the bone and the gaping holes, and that these weapons should not be accessible to citizens like us,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So, we're surpassing, I feel like every time I have to make a report, the number just jumps. We were at 130 mass shootings in the U.S., then 145, then 160. It looks like we may surpass 200, possibly, before the year is over. So, we report the few that make the national headlines, but with numbers increasing like that on a daily basis, there's obviously a plethora that are happening that aren't being reported on a national level. So it looks like we may be setting a record. But you've been working on some things, and we're making strides. The General Assembly passed Senate Bill 1, right, that would prohibit people with wear and carry permits to carry in certain locations, such as school playgrounds, stadiums, government buildings, polling places, certain health facilities. That's still awaiting Governor Moore's signature?
It is.
Okay, and so if he does sign, then that would go into effect October 1st?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
how do you feel about that?
It's interesting. My big focus has been on illegal handguns. And so, as you know, we also had a bill down there in Annapolis that dealt with illegal handguns. So for us, an illegal handgun is a gun that an individual has. It's not properly registered. They don't have wear, carry, and transport permit. And so what we're finding is that a number of the crimes, a number of the shootings, a number of the murders were being perpetrated by individuals with illegal handguns. And so for us, we really try to steer and focus with that. My bill specifically says that the penalty phase for an illegal handgun. If you have an illegal handgun and you were between 18 and 20, you looked at 5-year, $10,000 fine. That same illegal handgun, if you're 21 or above, was 3 years and $2,500 fine.
Yeah.
I just tried to make it uniform.
Yeah.
And boy, was I in for a fight.
Yeah. I'm telling you, it's it's wild to see where people put their value, and what people value over human life at times.
Well, it was, and what I realized was that, everybody wants the same thing, a safer community, but we all want to go about it differently.
Different ways, yeah.
And with me, with Annapolis, to be honest, I didn't go down there and play the game the way that it needed to be played. And a lot of that had to do with inexperience. We lost some people that would have been able to make the transition a little more smooth.
Right.
But I also realized I had to educate a number of people what this was going to do. Look, I get the fact that black people have had to deal with mass incarceration, but this bill wasn't about mass incarceration. This bill was about uniformity, but this bill also sent a very strong message to individuals who are running around carrying illegal handguns. When I ran on if you have an illegal handgun, you can go to jail.
Right.
Because that was to get individuals to be held accountable.
Absolutely.
And, for us, we listen to the jail calls of individuals, and these jail calls, they're talking about that. 5 years doesn't really put an individual in jail for a significant amount of time period compared to the 8 years. To the 3 years. But it took a sentence of 3 years, because on 3 years, you have the Restorative Justice Act. Justice Reinvestment Act of 2016, and that said any misdemeanors, and wear, carry, transport a handgun is a misdemeanor, you serve 25% of your time. So now you go from 8-year sentence if you're giving 3 years to 15-month sentence if you're giving 5. The difference is one is local and now one could be the Division of Correction.
Yeah.
And so for me, that I felt for the kid who's on the cusp that really isn't going to carry a gun regularly, but just picks up because everybody else is doing it, hopefully they'll think twice. And that to me is one of the ways we can try to go ahead and reduce the murder rate if fewer people have the legal handguns.
Okay. The passage of HB 824, where is that on your agenda?
Legislation that includes bill's language to ensure equitable penalty for those caught with possession, the handgun.
Okay.
Yes. That's sort of like what they took my bill and put it in some other things.
Okay,
And
okay.
so, yes, that's what they did. And look, it passed. I was very, very happy it passed. We're just waiting on Governor Moore to go ahead and sign that.
Okay.
So, yes, we're very,
Sounds
very
good.
excited. I mean, look, it was a humongous win for us because we went down there as rookies. We sat, we talked, we understood the situation. We had the conversation with the people. What I also realized is down in Annapolis, sisters run Annapolis. And they're led by Adrienne Jones, dynamic, phenomenal Speaker of the House. And you have to understand the legislative agenda for blacks in the state of Maryland is a high priority. And so part of that legislative agenda is we're not going to have mass incarceration. We're not going to go back. And so what I had to do was make sure I sat down to explain how, yes, we're increasing the penalty, but this isn't going to lead to mass incarceration. And the goal is to save more lives with individuals. And so that was something that's very, very important. Something I learned that I'll also be doing. I will take the opportunity to go and have to sit down in tough conversations with members of the House Judiciary Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee so they understand my vision and where I'm coming from. Having been a defense attorney and a prosecutor, I'm not here to lock people up. I'm here to hold people accountable.
Right.
And that, to me, is where I'm headed. You know, I feel like one of the things that I'm also excited about that we're talking about is doing citation dockets. I ran on, we're going to focus on quality of life crimes. But we're not going to lock people up. I know everybody, he's going to lock up everybody. Oh, yeah, lock up everybody. You have the consent decree. You have my feeling and belief that we don't need to lock people up for low-level offenses. We need to hold them accountable. Where the police can give a citation, they're still on the streets performing their jobs against the violent offenders. But now we can go ahead and have the wraparound services for individuals with drug usage, loitering, trespass. We give you the wraparound service, hopefully maybe give you a stipend, drug, job, training, placement, GED. Those types of services need to be available that aren't available regularly.
Rehabilitation.
Yes,
and
I'm
things of
real
that
big
sort.
on that.
Absolutely. And of course, this week is a National Crime Victims Week.
Yes.
So, you know, again, we look at these crimes, and even when we have these mass shootings, it's almost like the media is so hyper-focused on the suspect, almost to a celebrity aspect. But this is a week to focus on the victims and their stories.
It is, and right now, if you go to our website, that's the state's attorney's office, www.stateattorney.org, we have a great video, and the video is from a victim who lost her son to gun violence. And I don't want to spoil it for everybody, but it is a person who was in the House of Legislation, and a legislator. And it's a very heartfelt story. I thank her for sharing it. I thank her for talking about the pain of a mother who lost her son to gun violence, how she was a young teenage mother, how her and her son grew up together in a lot of ways, and, you know, how her son, you know, was doing the right thing and was moving in the right direction. But it didn't matter. Gun violence still claimed him, even though the grandfather was a powerful member of the House legislature. That, you know, it didn't matter who you were. One of the things that people have to remember, these bullets, they don't discriminate.
Right.
And when they're shot out of a gun, they can hit you whether you're black, you're white, you're male, you're female. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to go and try to change some of the focus and attention from the perpetrators of the crime to the victims and the turmoil and the trauma that's left behind by some of the people that commit these crimes.
Absolutely. And, you know, people that have worked with you, they describe you as hardworking, respectful, dedicated, enthusiastic, genuine. So, you know, I'm sure your staff at the office sees you the same way. So now with the days ahead, if we haven't covered it, what are some goals? What are the goals that we haven't covered that for SAO, for the state's attorney's office?
Well, one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to get back in the courtroom. I am going to try a murder case.
Okay.
So I'm excited about having that opportunity to represent the citizens in that way.
Okay.
I'm just trying to let people know what we're doing. I'm trying to really focus on training. I felt the first 100 days we need to set the example of what we want to do.
Right.
And the expectations. And now it's about us meeting those expectations. Really focus on training, really focus on recruiting, focus on rebuilding that office. And I want to be the best public servant I can be for the citizens. And just, I'm asking everybody for patience.
Yeah.
I'm going to make some mistakes. I'm not perfect. I'm trying to learn this job, and this job has a lot of learning to do.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to do the best I can, because at the end of the day, I'm committed to the city that I fell in love with, and I'm committed to making a better city. At the end of the day, like I said, I ran for my daughter. I want to turn the city over to her and her generation so they're in a better place then than we are now.
And for folks and citizens that want to reach out to the state's attorney's office, I know you gave us the website, if you could give that one more time.
STattorney.org. I will also say you can also follow us on social media, whether it's my Twitter account or my Instagram account or the office's, state's attorney's office, Instagram or Twitter account. I'm terrible with social media. I'm terrible for all that. Look,
As long as you're good at your job, that's what we need.
I try to hire young people who know what they're doing with that.
That's what it is, right.
I would have hired in the 90s. We didn't have all this.
Yeah,
so,
exactly,
I'm learning it.
Yeah, you'll get someone
I'm
there.
focused on the job.
Run the social media for you.
Yeah.
Well, look, we appreciate all that you're doing for the city. Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates, thank you so much for coming by, sharing your time with us. We appreciate it. Much continued success to you and success to our city as we follow you during your tenure. And we appreciate you coming. I'm Erica Kane. Thank you so much for joining the To Be More podcast. If you missed any episodes, you can log on WMAR2news.com. Thanks for watching.